Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So there are a lot of us in the room, but there are a lot of us out there, I think, who are anxious to hear from Carol. Good morning. Good morning again. I'm Claudette Whiting, General Manager for Diversity and Inclusion at Microsoft. And, you know, we're real excited about the opportunity we have this morning to interact with, I think, a true icon and legend in the diversity field. All right, Carol. Carol Evans. And Carol is the CEO and founder of Working Mother Media. And I consider her a valued partner, you know, to corporate America, including to Microsoft. And yesterday we were really fortunate to have Carol here on campus for a Microsoft-sponsored event where we hosted a town hall meeting to talk about issues impacting women of color. And this is an initiative that Carol started at Working Mother Media. And it's already having a major impact on how many companies look at this issue. But, you know, Carol is here today to really talk to us about another important topic, and certainly important to Microsoft. And she has been at the forefront of this industry, and it's about work-life balance and the retention of talent. And so she's going to share with us today some of her expertise, her experiences, and also some of the best practices, things that she knows work at companies. She's been doing this a long time. I really consider her a friend and a close ally, and we have developed a great relationship over the past few years. When I sent the announcement out, there was a lot in there about her background, so I know you're familiar with that, so I won't, you know, go through all of that. But she really is best known as the creator of the well-known Best Companies for 100 Best Companies for Working Mothers. And fortunately, we've been on that list for the past 3 years. So at this point, let's put our hands together and give Carol a great Microsoft welcome. And there are seats up front. I'm feeling really lonely up there.
Don't be lonely. I'm with you, Claudette. Well, thank you very much for that Microsoft welcome. It felt pretty good. And I want to welcome you here today and tell you that this is a time for us to talk together. We can be very interactive here. You can interrupt me, ask me questions, stop me, say you don't want to know about that, you want to know about something else. But let me just ask you, I'm wearing my fancy shoes. No. Oh, my tag. I always wear the tag on my knee. You know, I mean, it's just, if you haven't learned that yet, this is the coolest thing, is to just wear your tag on your knee. It's especially good for video casting. Just kidding. All right, so let's start out by, let me just find out a little bit about you in the room. How many of you are moms? Raise your hand if you're moms. Okay, lots of moms. How about how many of you are dads? Okay, ooh, lots of dads. How many of you are thinking about becoming moms in the future? Moms to be sometime. Okay, good. And how many people of you work in HR or diversity areas? Okay, how many work in technology? I would think a lot. Finance? Anybody working in finance? That areas? Oh, a whole group over there. Okay. And how many of you? Let's just. My last question for the moment will be: how many of you find that there is a little bit of stress in your life when it comes to work-life balance? I had to raise my hand, you know, because I know there's a lot of stress. There is a lot of stress in the world today in general. We all know that. All you have to do is read the newspaper and you're stressed out. Turn on the radio, and in between songs you're going to be stressed out by anything else from the news column. But work-life balance is an issue for almost all employees today. And it really doesn't have as much to do with being a parent as many of us assume. I mean, work-life balance is an issue for everyone. And that's one of the first things that I tell people that I talk to about work-life balance issues, is that it is not just parents, not just moms, not just dads, that are feeling the stress of fitting a life into a work world. It's everybody. And I give you a great example of that, which was that a woman who worked for me came to me and said that she wanted to start working 3 days a week in the office and 2 days a week from home. And the reason was that her dog was dying. And she was very close to her dog. This was a childless woman. She was very close to her dog, Heidi, and I knew Heidi. But and Heidi she was told that Heidi might have another year to live. So she actually did this plan. She thought this out. She planned it. She came to me. She asked for it. She laid it all out on paper, and it was a request to do this for a year. She stayed home, worked from home 2 days a week, and worked in the office 3. And she was able to give her dog a very high quality of life for that last year of her life. And when the dog died, she was with her. It was very painful. You know, I mean, losing a family member of any kind is very painful. It was very painful, but it was so much eased by the thought in her mind that she had proactively done something, given this dog a gift of time. And you know, that's a beautiful story to me, because when you're thinking about yourself as a working mom or working dad, or when you're thinking about people who work for you, you know, it kind of opens up the mind to what the big possibilities are of how people might want to use the programs that companies can and do put in place. You know, I think you should all be very proud of Microsoft. And I'm going to tell you a couple things to be proud of. One thing to be proud of is the event that was hosted here yesterday. Working Mother has sponsored this initiative. We launched an initiative in 2002 called the Best Companies for Women of Color. And it was based on the premise of our now 20-year-old initiative, the 100 Best Companies for Working Mothers. And basically what this initiative does is it helps companies to find out what best practices are possible to put into place to support women of color in their quest for advancement and for cultural comfort in the workplace. And what we found in this initiative was that it was very hard for companies to apply for this list. We have hundreds of companies applying for the Working Mother list, but because of the newness of looking at where race and gender meet in the workplace, only 10 companies applied last year for our third year. I'm sorry, only 10 companies applied for our first year of the list, and last year only 20 companies applied for this list. So companies are they don't feel they have the goods to be measured yet. And so what we found was that, and actually the most useful thing that we could do was to host face-to-face meetings with employees, with women of color all around the country, to find out what the barriers are, to dig underneath the obvious surface issues and get into some real important thinking about what could be helpful. So we launched these meetings across the country, and Claudette was very helpful to us in that Microsoft sponsored one of our, what we call our Women of Color Town Halls in San Jose. And while we were there, we had such a moving and wonderful experience that day that she asked if we would bring this town hall to Redmond. And it's a very big deal. We only do 7 of these a year. Next year we'll do 9. But it's a very big deal to bring. It's a lot of work on everybody's part. And yesterday we had a magnificent event. The most important thing about the event, I think, is that it's not just Microsoft people, but we together welcome in a lot of other companies. We had Safeco and REI, KeyBank, a lot of the important Starbucks, Nike, a lot of the important employers in the area, all sending their women of color employees for a day of learning. So I'm proud of Microsoft for really being a leader in this movement and knowing that there's an enormous amount of work to be done and being willing to do that work with us. I'm also proud of Microsoft for being on the list for the last 3 years. And, you know, that could seem like a real, you know, like, oh, of course we're on the list, you know. I mean, it's an important company, and, you know, we have a lot of sophistication here. But there are a lot of important companies with a lot of sophistication all around the country who do not earn a place on this list. This list is so rigorous. I'm almost embarrassed to send out the application because it's so hard. And it takes about 1,000 man-hours for a company the size of Microsoft to fill out this application, because we ask everything. We ask everything about what you could possibly be doing to help your working families to mesh work and life together. And we measure in many different areas. We ask over 550 questions about not just your programs and your practices, but we also ask a lot of questions about usage. We found that when we just asked about programs, you know what happened, right? What do you think happened?
They had programs.
Yeah, they had programs and no one was using them. And you can build a great program, and if you keep it under a bushel and nobody knows about it, it doesn't cost you any money because you're not implementing it. So about 7 years ago, we changed our application and required companies to fill in the usage of each program, how many employees actually use your paternity leave or your maternity leave or your flex time programs. And so it's an extremely rigorous application, and Microsoft has won for the last 3 years. Microsoft does very, very well in a couple of areas. They score in the very, very, very top echelon, in the top 10 of all applicants. And it's, there's hundreds of applicants. They score in the top echelon for maternity and paternity leave and that whole area of tuition reimbursement, things that Microsoft does that cost them money, and it costs them money to implement, and really benefits you on a financial area there. And so that's a really important area, because maternity and paternity benefits and leave is one of the great needs, especially that women have. And it's a great need that men should have, but most men, unfortunately, don't take advantage of paternity leave in this country, even when it's so generously offered. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so Microsoft also scores very high on concierge services, which really helps employees to kind of smooth out their lives by offering anything from dry cleaning on site and take-home meals and all kinds of ways that it helps you with your health by having an easy access to exercise. And they also score pretty high in childcare, which is a very important area for us to measure, with access to near-site childcare. So one of the interesting things to look at is in the October issue, we do a full report on all the 100 best companies. And it's interesting to see, for you to look as employees, at how Microsoft does on the scoring. There's a lot of information in that issue. Because one of the things that happens in life is that we sort of have an imagined world out there that is the other guy. And it's easy to think that, wow, they must be much better than we are. And the truth is that these 100 companies are the real leaders in work-life balance, and they've not only invented programs, but they've refined them, and they've struggled to keep them in place through the ups and downs of business cycles. Very, very, very tough. A lot of times companies really wish they could pull back on programs, but the great companies don't. And I had to say that there's a lot of fluidity in terms of what companies do. They might pull back on one program and push forward on another, and a lot of times it's in response to employee surveys. So it's not like everything stays static, but the commitment to work-life balance is what we're always looking for, and that is something that you can't get by with and be on our list. All right, so at the end of the day, my message about this is that Microsoft cares about its employees, and it shows up in the application. A lot of companies care, and a lot of what's going on today, it's really interesting to see where is the envelope being pushed in these initiatives. One of the things that we find is incredibly important in terms of work-life balance is manager training. Because when you think about it, at the end of the day, you could work for a great company, and if you don't work for a great boss, you could have a really lousy experience. And every year, when that list comes out, I get a certain number of emails, not as much as I got before we started to measure usage, but I get a certain number of emails saying, how could you name blah, blah, blah to this list? I worked there, and I was denied this and denied that, and nobody has it, And you find pockets of employees who either aren't eligible for certain things, or you find really sad stories of managers not allowing employees to use programs that are actually on the books for them. And that's where most of the complaints about the list come from, is from disgruntled employees who have bosses who are holding back. Interestingly, one of the best things to combat this problem is manager training. And that is getting down to the nitty-gritty of bringing managers in, all managers, all levels, and taking them through why. Why do we want work-life balance? You know, why do we want our employees to be happy in their work-life balance? And the answer is not because we want to have happy employees. You know, I mean, that's not what it's about. Happy employees is the icing on the cake of work-life balance. That's just a great side benefit. It's really a very selfish motivation that great companies use to propel themselves forward to be leaders in work-life balance. And that is that employers who have less stress, who have their work-life program, their work-life issues figured out, who are paying attention to their health through smart health initiatives, these are employees who are more effective on the job every day, every minute, and every hour. And that's what managers need to be told. You know, I mean, there's a great thought, which is that does it really matter who's the last one out of the parking lot at the end of the night? Is that how we want to measure our employees? Or is it effective work? I have often posited that working mothers are the most efficient workers on the face of the earth. And there's one reason why. Does anybody know why? Want to take a stab? What?
You have to juggle the child, work, and
Yeah,
everything.
I agree with you, but except for one word that you said. You said they have to juggle their child and their work. No, it's not they have to. It's that they want to. They want to, and they want to get home at the end of the day to be with their child. You know, when my kids were young, I was desperate to get out of the office so that I could be with my child. I had a terrible, terrible, you know, gimmick, I guess you could call it, plan. My plan was really awful, which was that I'm just a person who loves to work, so I worked late a lot. So my plan was to keep my children up late. I was like, it's really not a very good plan. and you know, it worked when they were going to school at 1 in the afternoon, but when the kindergarten switched to 9 in the morning, I was like, uh-oh, I better get them to bed sometime. And then as they get older, they get to start their school day earlier and earlier, which doesn't make any sense because they want to sleep later and later the older they get. I don't understand that at all. But you know, so that was my solution, was that I kept them up late. But a more sensible solution is to get your work done and get home. And this is what working mothers, this is what makes them efficient. They actually want to get out of the office. They actually want to get home to their children. And being the last car out of the parking lot is not part of their goals. And you know, what's happening is that dads are starting to think the same way. They actually want to spend time with their children. What a thought! What a thought! And as there's more two-parent couples working, whatever you call that, two career families, you know, then you have where dads really want to have a real interactive part with their children. Dads suddenly get the idea, hey, maybe if I'm not the last person out of the parking lot, I could be efficient during the day, like the moms are, and spend more time with my kids at night. And so this is what's going on. And this is what's so hard for companies to understand and so hard for individual managers to understand. That moms can be incredibly efficient because they cut out so much of the, can I say it on the tape, so much crap. They cut out of their day because they're focused and they're passionate about getting home to their kids. And so manager training, you know, it's really important, and it makes a big difference to moms. Another thing that's really new and that I'm very excited about is phase back from maternity leave. I don't know if Microsoft does this, but it's a great new program that is catching on a lot. And that is that moms are having their babies and then they're coming back to work more slowly than they used to. You have very generous maternity leave. And so you have a big leg up over other companies that don't have that. But the phase back program says you might come back to work one day your first week, get acclimated, and then come back 2 or 3 days the next week, and so on until you're back to a full schedule. And what that does is it helps so much with separation anxiety. And when I say separation anxiety, I'm always talking about the mother, not the kid. It's the mother that has separation anxiety when she's got a newborn, and rightly so. I went back to work when my kids both were 6 weeks old. And being an entrepreneur, I didn't have any real, support system to not do that. I had my first meeting with my new chief financial officer while I was breastfeeding my child at home. It was it's not the way you really want to start your work life with a new CFO, but I had to. But phase back, I wish I had thought of that program. It's a great idea. There's also a very interesting new edge going on in work life, which is on creative career paths for women. And creative career paths for women is being looked at very closely by companies because it's really to try to avoid the Plan B thing. Plan B, which I write about in my book, I always had a Plan B. My Plan B was always to sell my house in Chappaqua, which got more and more valuable as time went on, and move to some town in Topeka, Kansas, where I could buy a house for $30,000. It'd be bigger than my house, much bigger than my house in Chappaqua, and change the financial equation. I never put Plan B in place, but it was really nice to have Plan B, because then when things got stressful and I got under, and I just layer stress on top of myself on purpose. When I got to the boiling point, I would always say to my husband, "Gee, Bob, we could always move to Topeka. Remember that plan? That's a great plan. We could just move to Topeka. Let's think about it. Come on. Let's check the prices of houses in Topeka this year. Wow, are they low? Look at this house. Go online and check out what they look like. You could buy a mansion in Topeka for $100,000. So that was my Plan B. And every woman that I talked to, a lot of them have Plan B. And it might be to start their own business, because then even though they might be working more hours, they're working more hours under their own control. It's a hugely passionate feeling that women have, that they could be in control of their hours. They might have an idea of taking off 3 or 4 years of work and then getting back in. Very tough to do today. Getting back in is not easy. The on-ramps are really, really clogged with people trying to get back in. So companies wanting to avoid Plan B are really looking at the creative career path for women. And so some companies are giving a very long time off with a job guarantee at the end, and in between, attachment to the company through training programs, through monthly meetings that the person taking a significant period of time off is allowed to come into, conference calls they can participate in. Very creative ideas looking at this career path. Why does it have to be? Why is father time? We know he's not a mom, because a mom time would be so much more generous to us. Why does father time make our most important time of our career at the exact time that we absolutely have to start having our babies or lose out? It's astonishing to me how that trajectory, whether you're going for partner or tenure, or whether you're really trying to get up and show that you're better than the rest. I'm certain that this is a big issue for your technology field. Whatever industry it is, the cruelty of the need to really push ahead and prove your value in your early 30s, when you've learned enough to actually be valuable, you actually know something and know how to do something, and yet you are really hitting right into the time when you need to have your babies or not. So it's a cruelty, and that the creative career paths for women is so important. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I'll give you a few. I want to ask you some questions. I'll give you a few ideas of what I do to and have done now that my kids are older. My kids are almost 19 and almost 16. About how I balance work and life. But first I have to tell you how not to balance work and life. One thing is, don't write a book about how to balance work and life. That is a terrible idea. Just awful. And it was an idea that came to me a year ago, a year and a half ago. I said to my business development person, I said, I'd like to write a book about how to achieve work-life balance, how we do it. I've got so many stories. I've got 1 million stories. And Tammy Palazzo, my business development director, she said, I could sell that book. And sure enough, she called people she knew at Penguin Press, and they bought the book immediately. I'm like, what? I have to write a book? You gotta be kidding! On top of everything else that I'm doing as a CEO of Working Mother and launching this initiative and that thing. So anyway, we went to Italy. on vacation. I said, okay, I'll write my book on vacation. I took my BlackBerry, and I'm in the gondola writing the first chapter of my book. I'm in the Vatican waiting in line for a long time. Julia said, Mommy, is that sacrilegious to write a book in the Vatican? I said, I don't know, but I'm doing it, wherever I went. So then what I would do is I'd write this thing in the book. At night, we'd go out to a fabulous restaurant, and have all this fabulous pasta and stuff. And I'd pull out my BlackBerry. Okay, now listen. And I'd read what I'd written that day to Bob and Julia and Robert. And if they laughed a little, if they thought it was funny and good, then I would send it off to the publisher. If they didn't, then I'd be on the gondola again, working some more. Anyway, it took me a year. I worked every Saturday and Sunday on it, and it's crazy. Julia said to me, Mommy, I never realized how much time we spent together until you started writing this book, and now we're not. So that's not a good idea. The book is called This Is How We Do It, The Working Mother's Manifesto, and it doesn't come out till May, but if you want to reserve your copy, you can order it on Amazon.com. It's a funny book, but full of real life tips and ideas straight from our readers of the magazine, who give us so generously of their concepts, and straight from the 100 Best Companies, all the knowledge that I have on what really works for companies and for women. But a few of my thoughts on how to do it, how I do it. First thing is for children. I do age-appropriate things with the kids, not try to push them ahead too far. I found that it doesn't do any good to do things that they're not ready for. You really need to dig into what they actually want to do right now. Yes?
Only because you said I could.
Yes, you can.
You said age-appropriate things for children. What if you have children on opposite ends? Like I have a 12-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Oh yeah, that's tricky. But there's a joy in that, because what that means is that you don't have to be too bored. You can do some things for the 12-year-old and some things for the 2-year-old, and of course you can try to engage them together. Have the 12-year-old think of an outing that the 2-year-old will like. So you make it the 12-year-old's responsibility. What do you think? What's your youngest child's name?
TJ.
TJ. What do you think TJ would like to do on Saturday? You get to plan it. And just shake it up. And for me, age-appropriate things were like my son wanted to learn video games, and he was learning disabled, so I had to learn Mario. and I learned it, and I learned it really well. And now, he's an Xbox lover, and he's doing now. Yeah, he loves the Xbox, and he's doing what is he doing? He's like pimping his ride on those car programs where he spends all this time on the Xbox making the car do this and that and the other. And it's scary. And for Julia she's the ultimate consumer. I mean, she basically lives to shop. I hate to shop. I really do. I don't like to shop. But I go shopping with Julia because that's what she loves. And it took me a long time to figure this out, but I finally figured out that this could be really useful. Because my closet was full of gray, brown, black suits. And, Julia, she'd look at it, she'd go, yeah, Mom, that gray suit, that really livens it up. So I decided that we would go shopping together and shop for me instead of for her. She ran out of money right away. She spent all the money I allocated for her, like by February, for the year. So my clothing allowance is a little bit bigger than hers. So I said, okay, you can shop for me. Oh my God, this became like such a cool thing for us. Together, we go into a store, and she walks through the store like this. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Here, Mom, try them on. So we go into the dressing room. She goes, no, that, yes, you had to buy that. So I tried this on. I'm like, a pink kind of nubby suit, it looks like it's from the 30s. Are you sure? Mom, you're buying it. Oh, okay. When she says, Mom, you're buying it, I know the gig is up. I have to buy it. So isn't it true, Claudette? Wherever I go, I wear these wild, colorful, crazy clothes. And my shoes, the famous shoes, these are the 20th anniversary shoes. Oh, she picked out my black tie and hers. Oh my gosh, she's amazing. So we do that for fun because that's what she likes. I would not spend any of this time in these stores if it wasn't for her desire. And I'll tell you one thing about kids too. When they were little, I had to rush home to be with them. Now that they're big, honestly, I rush home so they can ignore me.
Oh, okay.
I found out that's what they want to do. They don't want me not to be home. You see, that's the secret. They want me to be home, but they want to ignore me. And they want to be allowed to ignore me. It's not like I have to really give them that due. I'm home. Hi, Mom. That's it. That's it for the night. Okay. You want to watch TV together? No. Okay. Okay. But if I'm not home, they're not happy. I mean, they're not going to tell me that, but I can feel it. Yes.
Earlier about how working mothers are more productive because they're trying to rush home to be with their kids. I'm wondering what you've seen in terms of people bringing their work home, especially with laptops and that type of thing, what the trend is in that.
Guilty. I mean, especially my book. I don't do any laptop work at home except for writing my book, but I do a lot of BlackBerry work at home because I'm really curious about what the next BlackBerry message is going to be. I love email. And so I do a lot of that. But what we're finding is that, yes, it has a creep. It's creeping into the home a lot, and it can be a real benefit because it can get you home so that your kids can ignore you or hang out, or you can put them to bed and then go back to work. So if you leave the office at 5 and you're back on your computer at 9:30 and they're asleep, that's a beautiful thing. The problem is that if it becomes a requirement that's if you build your life into it, what is sacrifice? Can you imagine what's sacrifice when you do too much of this? Sleep. Sleep. We have moms who are on their laptops until 1 o'clock in the morning, and moms desperately need their sleep. Yes. So I'm just saying, I argue that it's a good and a bad, and it's up to the mom to manage that or the dad to manage that. If you've got a system where you can get home, put your kids to bed, and then work, and you're leaving that office at 5, and your manager knows and understands, that's a beautiful thing. If you're working till 7 and you're coming home and you're spending a few minutes with your kids and then you're back on your laptop and you're addicted to your work, that's a very bad thing. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Over here first, and then you.
My question is, you said earlier that manager training is key to achieving work-life balance in the workplace. My question is there a correlation between work-life balance and compensation system? And I'm asking because I'm from Europe, and there you work 8 hours, whatever is overtime, you have to be paid overtime, which is more expensive for the company than regular time. So companies are very much against people working overtime, and everybody, not just women or men. This system forces both men and women to go home after 8 hours, or if they have to work longer, to take some hours off the next day.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. So
I just could sit here and dream, listen to you all day, talk about what they do in Europe.
Yeah, but I think instead of saying like, okay, manager training, I think manager training is really key. It's part of it. But it would also make sense to encourage companies to look at the compensation system if they are really interested, truly interested in achieving work-life balance.
Well, there's a problem with this, which is very complex, but it's about competition. Our companies in America can't afford to not be competitive. And so a lot of times they're unwilling to institute radical things that they know no one else is going to follow them on, because they could get into a situation where they're no longer competitive. And this is a very big issue for our country. We are capitalists, and we have a firm system of competition that our country's built on, and that seems to be working for a lot of the companies. America is 164. United States is 164th out of 169 companies in issues of that affect working parents. We are very lousy at. We have our great companies, but as a whole, we're very lousy at this because we don't have any government regulation hardly to speak of at all, and so because of the capitalist system, we go by what works for the companies. So we're nowhere when it comes to that to Europe. Yes.
But then the conclusion would be that
Work-life balance is not possible in corporate America, because if it is possible, if people all only had to work 8 hours per day, America would not be competitive any longer.
Well, it's not that America wouldn't be competitive. If all companies did it, America would be very competitive. It's that if one company does it, then that company might not be competitive. And yet, at the same time, if all companies in America just did what the 100 best companies do, we would have, within the capitalist system, very excellent work-life balance. Because then the competition becomes between companies to keep this balance going within the capitalist system. I think it's way beyond my powers to change or push the economic system. There's a lot of people working on that in Washington, and a lot of great organizations. And my father's an economist, but he's a really crazy capitalist economist, so you know, I know both extremes. But so my advocacy work is to get companies to be the best within the system that we already have, and let other people work on changing that part, the politics part of the system. And I do think that if all companies did what the 100 best companies do, it would make a gigantic difference in the world. And all the 100 best companies know that they can improve. There's not one of them on the list, even the ones in the top 10. There's no one on that list that thinks that they can't improve. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a person here first. Oh, Frida.
No, hi. How you doing? I was just going to ask, what do you see are some of the fundamental barriers or issues that managers themselves face with trying to embrace or implement any of the policies for flexible work life, or even programs, or even to support it? What kind of, consistent issue or barriers you see crop up, or questions they may have that they're facing?
That managers face? Well, I mean, let's talk first about this issue of stigma. There's a big problem with stigma in this country. We had a survey that we asked women, do you feel a stigma about using work-life balance programs? And 66% of our readers said they feel a stigma against using work-life balance programs. Well, I was talking to Ellen Galinsky from the Families and Work Institute, and I was telling her, 66% of our readers feel it. And she goes, oh, that's a very low figure. We have 84% when we ask in our survey. 84% feel there's a stigma. So our readers are probably a little bit more proactive about use of programs because they read it every month in Working Mother. But the issue of stigma is deeply related to what managers, to this question of yours. Because what you find is that individuals feel there's a stigma against companies using programs, and managers particularly feel that there's a stigma against them allowing employees to use. I might be seen as less of a manager, less of a driver, less of a mover and shaker who's going to make a difference for my company if I turn out to be the manager who's really making this work for my employees. It's topsy-turvy thinking, because it's just not true. The manager who really gets this and knows this and implements this is going to have a work team that is well-oiled and really engineered for success. So it's topsy-turvy thinking, but the psychology of this is huge. And the psychology of the stigma is everywhere. So one of the things that I talk to employees about and managers is to try to get over that stigma. Let's use these programs. And by the way, interesting, one of the sections in our application that we measure, and for a while there I was like, okay, why is this so important? But one of the things that we measure is all the ways that a company markets their programs to employees. So we get companies to send us their brochures and all the stuff that they do, and we look at how they market the programs to employees, because we found out over the years that this issue of usage is directly correlated and tied to the issue of marketing your programs to your employees. If I have an AEP, if I have a near-site child care center, if I have 4 weeks paternity leave, and I don't tell anybody, I don't market it, employees are consumers of the company's benefits. And we're pretty poor consumers, especially I think in this country. We're pretty poor consumers. We don't educate ourselves on we should be reading that manual. We should be investigating, and we don't. We're all too busy. So we've started rewarding points to companies for how effectively and actively they market their programs to their employees. And that's something that can make a big difference for you. Very interesting. Yes?
Best practices to share about how we can help managers overcome this stigma?
Well, manager training, I can't emphasize it enough. A lot of companies don't really have effective manager training on work-life balance. It's actually a program that you have to put in place that you have to really think through, because you have a lot of managers. You have to go top to bottom. It can't just be top people. It has to be people, middle managers managing down, and as low as you can get. You have to train. But there's nothing that substitutes for manager training. And so when you're training managers, if you train them on the stigma issue, it suddenly becomes very clear. Wow, stigma, yeah, we can all relate to that. We all know that we've made choices because of stigma. I've made choices because of stigma. We've all made choices because of stigma. So, when you get to the manager training, there's all kinds of things involved with manager training. I mean, that's just stigma is just one of them. But, I mean, a lot of managers don't know what the benefits of the company are. Marketing your programs through manager training is very important. But and in manager training, there's some really interesting things that you can do where, a lot of the managers are men, let's face it. And the higher up you go, the more likely they are to be men. And so training men not to think of women as their daughters or wives. There's methodologies for doing that, but it sounds like a funny thing. But when men think of employees as daughters and wives, it doesn't help us. Because when they think of us as daughters, they protect us from the difficult assignments that we need in order to move ahead. And that protection is very, very, very unhelpful. We need those tough assignments, and we don't want our managers to assume that we don't want a tough assignment just because we're out to here with a new baby coming along. We may want that tough assignment, or because we have a 3-month-old baby at home. Don't tell us that you won't send us to Europe because we have a 3-month-old baby at home. Maybe we want that. So when men treat us like daughters, it's painful. When managers who are men treat us like wives, it's much, much more painful. Because a lot of times the higher up you go, the managers are more likely to have stay-at-home wives, and there's a definite feeling that happens that says, why aren't you staying home? You could figure it out if you really wanted to. You could stay home if you could just figure this out. And so these personal issues, these challenging managers about how they feel, and women too, of course. I mean, a lot of women, trailblazer women who did it this way 25 years ago can be sometimes the worst enemies of the Gen X moms. Right. I mean, Gen X moms, don't want to be the trailblazer baby boomer moms. People say to me all the time, don't label me with your baby boomer guilt. I have my own kind of guilt. I'm a Gen X kind of guilt. And so, there's very deep, rich stuff in the management training area. And there's a lot of great work being done by consultants and professionals who do this. But it's the most important thing. I can't offer anything else up. Ellen Galinsky taught me when I first came back to Working Mother. I was away for 12 years, and I acquired the company after when it came up for sale because I was like, okay, another man is going to buy the magazine that I was at for 10 years, and they're going to screw it up. No, a mother has to own this company. But so, the first thing she said to me when I said, what's going on in work-life balance? I've been out for 12 years. She said, manager training is really the whole gig, baby. So, yes.
This is another question about perception and stigma. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I've heard from a number of working moms around here that I found difficult and kind of scary is that it's not even that they can't work the 8 hours, or that they often work even more than 8 hours. But there are people who will come in early. They'll come in at 7, and their kids are off at daycare or something, but they'll leave at 4. Whereas many people, especially in technology companies, will roll in around noon and stay till 10 p.m. or something. And the difficulty that they have is that that they're leaving at 4 p.m. and it looks bad. Yeah. And their managers make comments like you're not working enough. And I'm sure you've encountered this in various ways. And I wonder if there's any ways to.
Yes, there's lots of ways. That's called flex time, and formalized flex time is very helpful to companies. Flex time is starting your day. There's all kinds of things under the heading of flexibility. And Microsoft scores very very well on flexibility. But under flexibility. It's compressed work week, job sharing, part-time professional work is a very big, very exciting part that's newly developing now. But flex time is starting your day and ending your day differently from the rest of the company. And it could be by a half an hour, it could be by 3 hours. The important thing with flex time is to have it be formalized and have it not just be ad hoc. And that's part of the manager training thing too. But if companies officially allow employees to start and end their day at different times, extremely helpful, especially with the creative career plan, because a mom can shift or dad can shift their start and end time as the child goes to kindergarten at 1 or at 9. Why do they have that kindergarten thing where it changes in the middle of the year? I don't know, but it's there. And and then they're starting school at 6 a.m. Woo! I got to be up at 5. But anyway, so I might as well come to work after I drop them off at 6:30. But so yes, formal flex time is what you're talking about. And if you formalize it and then everybody knows that that's what it is, then that 4 o'clock when you're leaving, yes, there's certain days where it creates problems because of work group issues, but if the work group knows this is what's happening, they can work around it, and you can use all the technology that we have at our disposal, including home offices, to make up for some of that, the needs that arise on a not everyday basis. But this is all about straight talk. In my book, I preach a lot about straight talk. I think that companies need to hear straight talk from their employees. Employees need to deliver straight talk to their bosses. And then their bosses need to deliver straight talk to their bosses. And so if you're leaving at 4, part of straight talk is to say, I leave at 4. If there's something that's going to arise because of that, let me know, and I can adjust my schedule. And straight talk is like an almost miraculous kind of thing that, because it takes that stigma away. And it's very hard to do. People are so afraid of straight talk. I don't know why, but we are just so afraid of saying what's honestly true on our mind. Yeah, it's so tough. But
I was just thinking about with the comment around management training being so critical. I just feel that within Microsoft sometimes we have such a huge haze around getting managers into training and trying to use. And so with this being so critical, have you found companies who often keep running and gunning and truly don't have time to get managers into training? What other approaches could we use?
So you have to require management training. It can't be optional. It has to be a requirement. Every person must go through management training when they move to the next level. They have to go through some X amount. I mean, it has to be required. It doesn't have to be long-winded. You can try to keep it within a reasonable amount of time, but it has to be required in order to really, because the people who will volunteer for management training are the ones who don't need it. The people, yes.
It seems to be what I see as another issue related to this about managers not being organized, processes not being documented. I mean, the joke is sort of, yes, you have flex time, you can work as many hours as you want. And the reality of it, I think, a lot of the time is that the business processes aren't documented. We're just not organized enough, so it takes 12 hours to do what it should take 8 hours to do. So I'm curious to know what other companies have done around that organizational sort of process issue. I think it's more than training on what are the policies.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Let's make a note here. One thing that really helps is employee surveys. And I know sometimes employees go, oh my God, we're surveyed to death. But employee surveys on work-life balance issues are usually very welcomed by employees because they really they want to vent, they want to tell their stories, they want to say what the problem is, and they're afraid of the straight talk. So an employee survey can handle a lot of that. I mean, there's a company I think heard from that did a global employee survey. What did they call it? It was like a mass survey. They posted a survey online, and they had everybody globally respond to it voluntarily, and they had some huge number of people respond. It was like they made it into a fun thing, but having surveys on a regular basis about this can really turn up the problems of process, because when you're having a problem with process and it's affecting work-life balance, it oftentimes doesn't come to the surface unless you're doing continuous, frequent employee surveys. Every company has its own things that they trip over, and at one company it might be that that the managers really haven't been trained. In another company it might be that there's some real process issues that need to be addressed. There's all kinds of Six Sigma type things that you can look at, but I think that finding out what the problems are, if they are process problems, through employee surveys, making sure that that's what you're asking. If you're identifying that, make sure that your company is asking that in the employee surveys. Yes. I don't.
Also a company culture point issue here specifically at Microsoft, because we're really a culture that just kind of rewards and acknowledges the heroes. And the heroes are the guys that end up, the men or women that end up staying up all night and pulling the all-nighters and delivering the project or delivering the product. And that doesn't really fit into work-life balance. It doesn't fit into having a regular, predictable work schedule. And it just seems to be a part of our culture that we really kind of pat those folks on the back.
Yeah, well, okay. There's a lot of issues that you've raised here. Company culture is hard to change. There's a culture of overwork in the technology industry as a whole that's very painful for mothers and new moms and new dads especially. Overwork is the #1 complaint of women in business today. And it spills over to a lot of men too. I mean, this is the issue raised by the woman from Europe. You know, in Europe, you don't overwork, and the reason why they do that, there's a lot of reasons. One is that they have great programs for moms, and another one is that they're trying to have their unemployment numbers go down, so they want more people to have more jobs. But the issue of being a hero is a tough one, and companies need to make heroes out of moms who work 9 to 5 and get a lot done. And you could have an awards program, a Microsoft Mom Award program, where you award some of your working mothers. We run a Working Mother of the Year program. You could have your own Working Mother of the Year program at Microsoft and highlight someone who walks out the door at 4 and works from 8 to 4, or works 3 days a week as a part-time professional, and get that culture, get that image of a woman who does it. Like I've had such excitement watching this show, Commander-in-Chief. Yeah, isn't it exciting? The first day that I watched it, I sat in my little, we have a lazy boy that we named. We like her so much, we call her Shirley. So I was sitting in Shirley, and I found myself just crying at the end, little tears coming down my cheeks. I'm like, why am I crying? Okay, because this is an image for me to look at of a woman running this country. We know women can run this country, and we know women won't run this country. Not in my lifetime, probably, but it could happen. And this is a role model for me to look at and watch. Very powerful. You need to set up role models who are moms and make them heroes. This is an easy, fun thing for you to do. Set up some hero moms for others to look at, because role modeling, when we do our women of color work, lack of role models and mentors is the #1 barrier to advancement that women of color tell us in every city that we go to. How astonishing. It's not that hard to build role models into our lives, and it's not that hard to find mentors. You create processes to find mentors. This should be something that can be fixed, and it's a great question, Otto, because it is fixable. Set up role models and heroes. The culture of overwork is not going to be taken away by setting up role models who don't overwork. And it's not like suddenly your whole company is going to stop working hard. That's not going to happen. But to have the role models for that segment of women that you want to retain and that you want to attract. The people who are going to overwork themselves aren't going to quit overworking. But to have that group that is served by that role model, wow, that's powerful. Yes?
Could you develop on the example of this ramp-up program in this company, giving a long time period for the employee away and training and things like that? Because I think this is what's missing at Microsoft, some kind of a ramp-up program after a long leave.
Yeah, on-ramps, off-ramps, very tough topic. And I just wrote down the word retention, too, because I want to talk about that in a minute also. Don't remind me to do that. But on-ramps are to get women back into the workforce after taking significant time periods off. Off-ramps are women, when they leave, they take Plan B. Off-ramps are real easy to find. You just do it. On-ramps are clogged and hard. And the most effective programs I've found are these programs that are being instituted by the accounting firms, who have a huge problem because a lot of times the accounting firms send you're an accountant there. You go to your client and you work there, and it creates all kinds of problems with work-life balance. Very 24/7 culture. And so they started this program where it's called Personal Pursuits at Deloitte, for example. Personal Pursuits. I think it's written about in our October issue. And so you say you're going to take 3 years off or 5 years off, and you keep in contact every month of those 5 years through either phone work or meetings, a combination of phone and meetings, and you keep in contact with your work group. It's a brilliant program, and it's really helped. And so then at the end of 5 years, you can get back, you job guaranteed, or you get back in, and you find that you haven't lost that connection. I mean, what I urge women who take long times off is to volunteer, keep their skills sharp by volunteering, doing really tough volunteer work in their field, sort of related to their field. That's a really helpful way to do it. Yes.
Everything that you said also applies to those who don't have families, but they are just in a worse position. Because if you have a family, you can always have the excuse that you want to take the family cat to the vet, or your kid fell and now you have to leave. But if you don't have a family and you still want to be a hero, no matter how efficient you are, there's even that much more stigma attached to leaving work at 5 p.m. because you have to go skiing, and then the next day you come back and you're fresh. So, I mean, it's great to know that you're taking steps in that direction, but even those steps you're taking are more geared towards those who have families.
But let me tell you something. Gen X women and men are really, really good at asking for the balanced life without having their families yet. And you should just get that Gen X attitude in your mind, because I meet Gen Xers all the time who just say, you know, I want to have a whole life. I don't want to just be a one-dimensional person who's working all the time. And so the Gen X attitude of demanding a whole life is really permeating, you know, a lot of areas of the country, and, you know, maybe very prevalent in the Starbucks coffee shops. But that's something for you to think about. That's,
as you said, like at Starbucks, that's their culture and it's accepted. Here, where you get a lot more service if you have a family and there's an emergency. But if your emergency is something personal and some other cause that's important to you personally, it's harder to get sympathy there.
Well, and I sympathize with that, but I also feel that people make choices. You know, I mean, you make your choice. And as a single person, if you really want to have a whole life, you probably can work here at Microsoft because they have the programs, and you can make that decision. If you want to work here and be an overworking hero, you can't do both. So you have to make choices. And I don't think that's Microsoft's responsibility. Microsoft shouldn't be deciding for you what your choices are. You should be deciding that. And as long as they have programs that you can hang on to and implement, that's Microsoft's responsibility. Then you make your own choice. Yes?
I was just going to share something. You talked a lot about working mothers. I happen to have been a working father. I had 3 small babies to raise, 4, 6, and 8, when I basically took over sole responsibility for them. Had no family. Had no, other than the daycare that I could afford to pay for 3 kids. Interesting thing was, though, that I made choices that limited my career because of my children. My children still, to this day, consider that I am a workaholic, okay? Because I used to go pick them up at daycare and let them come and fall asleep in my office under my desk, okay? And then we'd go home after work.
Another crazy solution.
Now, there was another one I wanted to say. People were asking for best practices. I joined an organization called Parents Without Partners, okay? Once I got involved in it, I found myself, with a whole lot of moms, and moms used to take me, basically with them for girls' night out, because I was, I was dad raising these kids, going through exactly what you talk about in Working Mother and so forth. We get into discussions. My life was no different than these women, okay? But what began to happen was I had to go to Canada, or I had to go and do something, for business, because I was, a senior manager. What I would do is those people would help me by watching my kids where they might go and stay and hang out and do slumber, days. Yeah. Not just one slumber.
I write a lot about this in my book. Obviously Working Mother magazine can be read by men, and there's a lot of ideas in there for anybody. But I write a lot about this in my book, which is, finding people to help, and it includes organizations. There's tons of them out there. It includes neighbors. Don't be afraid to ask your neighbor for help. And if she's a stay-at-home mom, do you know how good that makes her feel? To be the stay-at-home mom who can help the working mom. The one way that I think we can stop the mommy wars or the dad-mom wars is to ask help of those stay-at-home moms. And neighbors, friends. If you don't have any family, people are so willing to help. I think of teachers as co-parents of our children. They know so much. We can ask them to do so much for us. People don't think to sit down and say to a teacher, do you see anything about what my child's going through? Oh my God, the teachers see everything. But if we don't ask, they don't tell. And so, that idea of finding your community to help is a hugely powerful thing.
the other thing too is that daycare costs so much money, right? And we all know that who have kids and they've had to do that and still go to work. The cool thing about this is it's not just the daycare. You trade and there is no cost. Yeah. I may take the weekend because I have to work during the week or so forth. Yeah. But there was this exchange and this extended family that developed, and people got really close. I mean, other dads, because at the time that this was happening to me, there was only 3% of the fathers that were given full physical custody of these kids. Very rare in Washington.
I actually see some programs like that with summertime. How do you take care of the kids in the summer? And I see moms who are banding together with their kids and with their neighbors and friends and hiring babysitters, paying for them communally, and setting up like a little fun summertime together. Very powerful. I think we have to close, but I want to leave you with one other thought because I didn't get quite through all my just simple few ideas to help you. One thought too, the last thing I'd leave you with is about yourself. In the whole working mother, working father panoply of issues, the thing that really gets dragged down the most is our sense of self. And very important for us to think about this. And I wrote a lot about this in the book. It's a lot about this in the magazine too. We lose our sleep because we make accommodations, and like you were talking about, working late. Our health suffers because we can't even find the time to get to the doctor, to do preventative medicine, or to exercise, or to eat right. Everything kind of comes crashing down on ourselves. And I feel that one of the things that any working mother or father can do to really help themselves is to focus a little bit on yourself. And the way to do that is to just allow you to have a few passions. It doesn't have to be like a big deal. Like, I like to garden. I didn't know I liked to garden, but when I bought this house in Chappaqua, it had all these old beds of garden beds that I felt like, oh, hey, I got to take care of these guys. They're going to die, So I started to garden these flower beds, and I am the world's worst gardener. I plant flowers that grow really big on the outside and little teeny ones on the inside of a round garden. Wait, there's something wrong with that. What is it? And I learned most of the things that I learned about gardening from reading those little plastic things that come with the plants. And I know that if I ever hit that retirement phase, one of the things that I would love to do is actually learn how to garden. But I just get great pleasure out of going out early on the Saturday morning and creeping out to the garden when everyone else is asleep. And which I couldn't do while I was writing my book, and creeping out there and gardening just a little bit on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, and then Robert would open the door and he'd say, "Mom, you want to watch TV with me?" When he was 8 or 9, now of course he wouldn't do that, but and so I'd put my gardening tools away right away, go in and watch TV. But that little bit of gardening for myself, I had no idea how important it was to me until I started writing my book. And I wrote on Saturday and Sunday mornings between 6 and noon, and that's how I wrote the book. And I said to myself at the end, like in the springtime when the sun was coming out, I said, I can't garden this year, or I will never get this book done. And I had no idea what that gardening meant to me as a human individual. So find those little things that you do and value them and give them their due, even if you're lousy at doing it. You might be a bad skier, but take that one ski trip in the winter. You might find that is something that is more important to you than you're even giving acknowledgement to. So anyway, I just thank you so much for your attention today. It was really fun to talk to you and answer your questions and give you a little bit of thoughts about being working moms and dads.
Thank you.